first muscle you need to know is called the frontalis. And isn't this super for you? It's right where the frontal bone is. So if you know the frontal bone, you know frontalis. Okay, you also need to know actions, and honestly, I don't want you to just memorize an action. I think if you kind of know where the muscle is, you can basically not guess, but like make sense of the action. So this is where the muscle is. It's going this direction. So literally it's raising your eyebrows. When I contract that frontalis muscle, that's how my eyebrows go up. Now for me, my frontalis muscles on either side must be kind of connected, because I can't like raise one eyebrow. I can't contract just one. I have to contract them both. Some of you are talented, and like your frontalises, you can do like separates. You can like raise one and not the other. See, you're good with the frontalis now. And then on the back, see, this is where this model is super sad. All you see is a little tiny red, so the red on these models is supposed to be the actual belly of the muscle. So that's the occipitalis. It's down where the occipital muscle is, and it's supposed to pull your scalp posteriorly. I don't know about you, but I can't make my scalp go back. Whatever. Okay, so that's the occipitalis. It's actually interesting, see all the gray in here are all tendons. So this is a super weird one where the occipitalis and the frontalis are actually connected by that. So you actually can't raise your eyebrows without, I don't know, kind of moving your scalp as well, because they're attached. So literally that's all you need to kind of do is raise the eyebrows on the frontalis and pull the scalp back or posteriorly on the occipitalis. All right, so there's a muscle that goes around the eye. It's called the orbicularis because it orbits the eye. So orbicularis oculi. And literally think of what something going around the eye would do. So the orbicularis oculi, you could be like blinking, you could be like squinting, like anything that you're like, whatever. And then there's another orbicularis, the orbicularis oris. So it's going around the oral cavity or the mouth. Orbicularis oris. So this is the kissing muscle. Pretty much you're all gonna action kissing. That's just it. All right, so just like there was a frontalis and occipitalis, there's a temporalis. You guys are not gonna miss these on the test. Temporalis. Okay, the temporalis you need to know is important because it actually, and I actually want you to know for this one, where it originates and where it inserts. There's only a few that you have to do origin and insertion. This is one of them. So it originates on the temporal bone, and it's the temporalis. Doesn't that make you happy? It inserts actually down on the coronoid process of the mandible. Okay? And when it attaches to the coronoid process of the mandible, and believe it or not, it's the muscle that pulls your jaw up when you're chewing. So it elevates and it kind of pulls it back too. So like the up and grind back a little bit motion, that's actually your temporalis. So action for the temporalis is elevating your mandible, retracting it a little bit, okay? And you need to know origin insertion, but they kind of make sense, hopefully. So, all right. The next big muscle on the face I want you to know is the masseter. So the masseter kind of goes up under the zygomatic, and then it wraps down around your mandible. So you also have to know this. Its origin is on the zygomatic arch, and its insertion is kind of the lateral surface of the mandible. And what does it do? It elevates the mandible for chewing too. So they're the two chewing muscles are the temporalis and the masseter that you have to know. There's more, but that's all you have to know. If you're a dental hygienist, oh, she's not in this lab. Oh, dental hygienist, you're gonna have to learn way more muscles of the jaw, because that's the way it is. The rest of you are like, escape. So, the next muscle, this is actually the longest name, and I don't even want to say it's hard to spell. It's not hard to spell. So it's the sternocleidomastoid. It's this big one that you can grab right here. Sternocleidomastoid, because it starts on your sternum, also attaches to your clavicle, sternocleido, and then it goes up to the mastoid process of your temporal bone. So that's your sternocleidomastoid. You have to also know origin insertion of that one. And it's the main muscle that actually helps your neck like flex and turn. So your sternocleidomastoid is a big flex turn of your neck muscle, action-wise. All right, that's the head. So the diaphragm, oh, he stole my diaphragm. Dang it, my diaphragm's next door. Well, this one has a good diaphragm, actually. So this muscle right here, the diaphragm, actually separates your thoracic cavity from your abdominal cavity. And I'll show you on the cadaver. It's a super cool muscle. So it literally is like it wraps around and seals so that you have separate thoracic and abdominal, which is super important. Okay, so that's the diaphragm. The diaphragm is also the prime mover of inspiration, breathing in. So literally, I mean, those of you who sing probably know that, right? So contracting your diaphragm increases the space in your thoracic cavity to give you more breath. So big on breathing in. The trapezius. So the trapezius is, this is one of my favorite models here. So it is on most of the models, when you look at them, one side is very superficial, one side is deep. So this is the superficial side, this is the deep side. All these muscles do exist. The trapezius is superficial, and it's literally this and that. So it literally makes like a kite on both sides. So this part up here, when that contracts, what do you think that does? If my neck is flexed, it would extend it. So extend the neck is good for that one. The lower ends actually are important in the scapula. So they're involved in like movement of the scapula. Both ends really, because this one, these will elevate the scapula and these will help pull the scapula like medially. So movement of the scapula is an important trapezius one. Okay, external and internal intercostals. This is another really important one for Bio 242 and breathing. So intercostal, so costal is ribs. These literally run between the ribs. So it starts on this rib and goes to that rib. So origin insertion, you don't have to know origin insertion, but it's literally from this rib to that rib to that rib. So these are the internal intercostals. They're more medial and more deep. And these are actually how you breathe out. So these are actually expiration. So when you contract your internal intercostals, you're actually pushing down on your ribs to force air out of your lungs. The external intercostals are actually more lateral and they're more superficial. They're kind of on top of the internal intercostals. Those help the diaphragm for inspiration. They like help raise your ribs to breathe in more. Okay. Obliques. External abdominal obliques. So actually, I don't even have this list, it's kind of sad. If you look at this, again, I told you one's superficial, one's deep. There's a lot of muscles that kind of go across your abdomen because there's no ribs protecting your abdomen. There's ribs protecting your thoracic cavity, but they're not really protecting your abdominal cavity. So muscles kind of do it instead. So there's 3 layers. The external abdominal obliques, the internal abdominal obliques. So externals go lateral to medial on they're most superficial. Internals go inferior to superior medial, so kind of the opposite direction, the internals. And then deep to that is a series of muscles that run exactly transverse. And those are the transverse abdominal muscles, okay? So transverse abdominal, internals, externals. I will tell you, this thing is gonna be sitting on the lab exam. You literally can look at the side and go, ooh, there's 3 layers. That must be external obliques, internal obliques, and transversus abdominis. On this side, there's only 2 layers. That must be transversus abdominis and internal obliques. All of the obliques are basically increasing intra-abdominal pressure. All 3 of those are creating abdominal pressure. And theoretically, when you contract those, what happens to your spine? Like I'm doing a crunch, right? So I'm flexing my spinal cord essentially when I do them. So abdominal pressure and flexing my spinal cord is what all 3 of those do. You okay with that? All right, rectus abdominis. These are super cool muscles. So they start, you have to know insertion, origin, or at least attachments on this particular case. So they start at the xiphoid process of the sternum, and then they go down basically to the pubic symphysis, all the way down the front. So that's the rectus abdominis. Again, when these contract, what am I doing? Flexing my spinal cord. This is showing you the rectus abdominis is super cool in that there's a belly of muscle and then connective tissue and then a belly of muscle and then connective tissue. So if your body fat percentage is down to 7% or under or something like that, you actually can see the belly. If you build it up, you can see like a bulge in the belly of the muscle, and then that's the 6-pack muscle that everybody's going for. And anyway. I've never seen my rectus abdominis, I'll tell you that. Erector spinae. So this is another muscle I love, right? So these are strips of muscles, and really the only place you can see them are on these little stand-up things. They're strips of muscles that go up the spinal cord. So they're erector spinae. Yay. They are, so if all of these muscles flex the spinal cord, what does this muscle do to the spinal cord? So we have flex and we have extend. Awesome, so they extend the spinal cord. Boom, you got the action. Okay, pecs. Keep putting these away. Pectoralis minor, so this is deep. Pectoralis major is over it. So the pectoralis minor, you need to know the origin insertion. So it's ribs, right? You can see it, it's ribs. And then this goes up to the coracoid process of the scapula also. So from the ribs to the coracoid process of the scapula, if it's doing that, in general, what is the pectoralis minor doing? Moving your scapula forward. Most of us are super good. My pectoralis minors are probably the biggest muscle in my body because I'm always sitting like this, right? So my pec minors are like super pulling them forward. My scapula is being pulled forward. So yeah, just think pec minors pulling your scapula forward. You got it. Pec major, I said. So the pec major, I'm not gonna make you learn origin insertion, but it goes a totally different direction. So in fact, this actually attaches onto your, you don't have to know this, but it attaches onto your humerus. So it's actually part of flexing your arm when you contract your pec major. It could also pull your rib cage up from this end. Whatever. Serratus anterior, trapezius, and rhomboid. So we already did trapezius, right? I have it on here twice. That's good. Serratus, well, let's start with rhomboid. The rhomboid are these muscles right here that attach sort of the medial end of your scapula to your spine. These, I'm always messed up. I have to get massages because my rhomboids are always a mess. So there you go, those are your rhomboids. The trapezius is on top of the rhomboids. And yeah, so they're bringing your scapula back. Obviously mine suck because my pec minors win the battle of where my scapula is going to be and my rhomboids don't pull it back enough. Serratus anterior are actually these. So they start low in your back and then they come up underneath. So these are really about protracting the scapula. Yeah. Oh, did I just give you the wrong one? So the latissimus dorsi, so you had to do serratus anterior, latissimus dorsi. And deltoid. So this is your deltoid, the big fat one on top of your arm. I'll pull out this arm because you can see it better on here. These are, you'll notice, massive numbers of rubber bands around them because all these muscles fall off really easily. So this big one kind of over your shoulder is your deltoid. So this is mainly about abducting your arm or abducting your shoulder might be a better to talk about the joint. While we're on here, please always make sure the rubber bands get back really well. The lab assistants get really pissed at me if like there's just a jumble of muscles on the cart. Don't do that to me. Okay. So we have supraspinatus and infraspinatus. You already know from the scapula, right? The supraspinatus is in the supraspinous fossa. So that's the supraspinatus. It stabilizes the shoulder. This is the infraspinatus in the infraspinous fossa. It stabilizes the shoulder. And then you have one on the other side of the scapula. This is actually, like if you feel, I can feel my supraspinatus, I can feel my infraspinatus because I can feel my spine, I can feel the muscle right above it and the muscle right below it. If I want to feel the subscapularis, that's basically your armpit muscle. Like this is the anterior portion of my scapula, actually. So this is my subscapularis here. It also stabilizes the shoulder. Don't you love this? It's great. I have cut out a lot of the arm muscles. So you have to do biceps brachii, which is the most superficial one. You guys have heard of biceps, probably. You have to write biceps brachii. And below it is actually a bigger muscle nobody talks about, which is the brachialis. So the brachialis, when you're actually doing exercises to try to get biceps, you're actually building your brachialis as well. So brachialis and biceps brachii. The biceps brachii inserts right close to the elbow. So that's about elbow. If it's doing something to the elbow, what's it doing? Flexing. So elbow flexion. And then the brachialis actually inserts further down. So it's actually working on the forearm and actually extending the forearm. Okay, let's see. There's one more in the arm, the brachioradialis. So it's a big fat one that comes up by the thumb. It will be helpful for you from here on out when we're naming nerves, when we're naming blood vessels, when we're naming whatever, if you always remember that like kind of where the radius is actually on your thumb side and the ulna is on your little finger side. So if you always go, any muscle that's on your thumb side is the radialis, any muscle that's on your pinky side is your radialis ulnaris. So this is the brachioradialis because it's on your thumb side, and it's also involved with the brachialis. So the brachialis and the brachioradialis are both extending the arm, or the forearm basically. All right, so that's arms. Now let's go to legs. I'm actually a super fan of, so we have legs here. What you'll notice is I told you, so the red is supposed to be belly of muscle and the gray is supposed to be connective tissue like tendons, but they just spray painted them kind of willy-nilly on here. So when you look at these actually on the cadaver, this isn't very reflective of where the tendons are at all. These stand-up ones over here are a lot better. So if you guys don't want to turn around, I'll grab them. I'll come back over it. So this leg is super good. Okay. So this one, kind of coming down this way, is called the psoas major. And then there's another one that it combines with that comes down the middle of the iliac crest. That's the iliacus. I love it when the names match the bone. So that's the iliacus, psoas major, and they kind of come together and pass through the pelvis. Both of them are involved in, so they're right here. When they contract, what are they going to do? Flex your hip. What is that? Hip, hip. Flex your hip. So that's the iliacus and the psoas major. My favorite muscle, just because I like the name, and you can kind of see it on here. There's a muscle right here, and then a big like silver band coming down the outside of your leg. That is the tensor fascia latae. Any latae muscle has to be a good muscle, right? Tensor fascia latae, it actually makes, you don't have to know this, but this whole thing going down the outside is called the iliotibial band. So it's actually the tendon, it's a big thick tendon, I'll show you on the cadaver, of the tensor fascia latae muscle. And it's also, so it's on the outside, and it like, but the belly of the muscle is kind of up here. So it's still flexing your hip, but it's also, if this contracts, it's a little weird, but it's actually, if this contracts on the outside, anything that contracts on the outside, what's it going to do to my leg? Is it going to, what do we call that? Adduct, right? So it's adducting my thigh, I guess. thigh adduction. Okay, so the butt. The big butt muscle is the gluteus maximus. Okay, gluteus maximus is about, so it's on the back. So if we're talking hip, if the one's on the front flexed it, what's the one on the back gonna do? Extend it. So seriously, extend the hip as gluteus maximus. Gluteus medius is more medial to that. So if I like pulled off the maximus, you can see the medius. It's literally going down the outside of the iliac crest where the iliacus goes down the inside of the iliac crest. And because it's more on the outside of the thigh, not only is it extending the hip, but it's also which one? Going away. Abduct. Abducting the thigh. Okay, gluteus medius, gluteus maximus. I keep having to look because I used to have a much longer list and I've decided I don't care that much. Okay, another cool muscle is this one. This is the longest muscle in your body. This is called the sartorius. It literally starts way up on almost your iliac crest and it inserts all the way down on your tibia. So that's the sartorius. Okay, it's on the front and it kind of wraps that way. So what's it doing to your hip? Flex hip because it's on the front, and because it wraps around to the middle, it's going to adduct your thigh because it's pulling towards the middle. And then the other one you have to know is there's one that goes straight down the medial part of your leg. That's the gracilis. So gracilis, literally straight down the medial part. So for sure that one is adduct your thigh. Okay, so then we'll do quads. So the quadriceps is the name for the whole bundle. So if I ask you what is this group of muscles, the answer is quadriceps. If I ask you for a specific one, there's 4 names. The rectus femoris is the middle one. I don't know. I don't know why we have to do, but anyway, rectus femoris is the big middle one. And then there's 3 more. The rectus, the vastus medialis, vastus intermedius, vastus lateralis. So the vastus intermedius is directly under the rectus femoris. And then you just have to go medial lateral for vastus medialis, vastus lateralis. All of these work down on the knee. So what do you think when these contract, they do to your knee? Extend. So if I'm going to work my quads, I do a leg extension. So extend the knee. All the quads. Same answer, extend the knee. Okay, and then on the back, these are your hamstrings. Sadly, there are also 4 hamstrings. All of the hamstrings together, when they contract, they flex my knee. So this is flex my knee, all the hamstrings, extend my knee, all the quadriceps. Okay, here's how you tell them apart. On the lateral side of your leg, they're kind of like sort of together. So we just call those the biceps femoris. So you have a biceps brachii and you have a biceps femoris. So the biceps femoris is near the femur and the biceps brachii is in the brachial region. And then on the other side, there's 2. This is much easier to see on the cadaver, but the one on top has a little belly up here and then a really long tendon. So that's the semitendinosus. And the one underneath is actually a much bigger, fatter muscle with a short tendon. We call that the semimembranosus. Semitendinosus, semimembranosus, biceps femoris, all of them flex the knee. We're almost there. Front of the leg. So you know this bone is the tibia. So the one right next to it is the tibialis anterior. So the tibialis anterior goes from the condyles of the femur, so that's where it originates. It actually inserts down on the calcaneus, weirdly enough. So the tibialis anterior, oh no, I lied. You don't have to know insertion origin for tibialis anterior. Skip that. So tibialis anterior is just doing what to your ankle? Flexing your ankle. That's tibialis anterior. The one right next to it is the extensor digitorum longus. I love that. If I ask you, what muscle is this? You go, extensor digitorum longus. And then I say, what action does it have? And you're like, it extends the digits, right? Because this would be flexing your toes, and this would be extending your toes, so it extends your toes, essentially. Okay, that's the front, tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum longus. On the back, you have two big muscles, the two fat ones on the top. These are your gastrocnemius. Underneath your gastrocnemius is a super big muscle. The whole thing came off, but so the gastrocnemius is the little bulgy one, superficial. The soleus is this big, fat, long one in the back. And in fact, the belly of your soleus muscle goes down the long tendon of the gastrocnemius, and literally they insert on the calcaneus. So when you feel that tendon of your gastrocnemius, the only thing that's protecting it from being torn is a little bit of belly of the soleus. So literally if you tear your, what do they call it when they, what's the common? Achilles tendon. You're actually tearing the tendon of your gastrocnemius muscle, and somehow probably tearing some of the belly of your soleus as well, because you're tearing it out. Both the gastrocnemius and the soleus are about flexing the foot. And that's your list. I think I screwed some part of it up somewhere.